what do AI agents of the future want to buy? What software would they want to buy to build their enterprises? Because Amadeus predicts that this year, I'm not sure if he still has this prediction, but he said it last year. He expects the first one-person unicorn to be this year. And you sure bet if that was true, that person isn't going to be making every software purchase decision in their organization. Then at best, they're going to be just sort of glancing at a recommendation saying, looks good to me. And so how do you market to AI agents? What do they need? These non-technical people in the company are now going through that same productivity uplift that developers have seen over the past 12 months as they've adopted tools like Cursor, Codex, Claude Code, and so on.
Hello, everybody. You are listening to Agents After Dark, powered by Prefactor. I am Matt Doughty, CEO and co-founder of Prefactor.ai. Prefactor is building the agentic control plane to allow regulated enterprises to track, manage, and control your agentic stack. Build a single source of truth for your organization to drive return on investment and get your board off your back. Today on Agents After Dark, we are talking with Andrew Bird at Affinda, converted actuary, experienced engineer, and now Affinda's first head of AI. Andrew is a huge advocate of leveraging AI in personal and professional settings and pushing the edge of what's possible. Thanks so much for joining me today, Andrew.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to the conversation.
No, excellent. So I guess, the first thing I'm really interested in is, when we've chatted in the past, kind of, you've talked about the journey that you've gone on and Affinda's gone on in terms of embedding AI into the platform. Affinda is a document workflow platform based in Australia, done very, very well. So I guess from your perspective, what's materially changed from AI in the last 12 to 18 months that's allowing you to do all of this stuff?
The IDP, or intelligent document processing space, it's gone through a few big technology transitions. Prior to 2018, it was all about these templates and these sort of algorithm and rules-based systems. And then along came the transformer and these pre-trained models that you could fine-tune on specific tasks. And so there's a bunch of companies like Affinda sort of took advantage of that and started fine-tuning them for specific business problems around like invoice processing and processing various different types of business documents. And then I guess the big change recently has been LLMs coming of age to you're reaching that threshold where it really is time to throw away those old models and rebuild on top of large language models. And it probably surprises people when they dig under the hood of document processing providers, how few of them are actually using LLMs under the hood, which is surprising because obviously you've got sort of PhD level intelligence on tap for a pretty reasonable price. Why wouldn't you use it for this? But it's actually tricky, like reforming a legacy tech stack on top of a completely new type of foundation. And so my mission in the past 18 months has been to take Affinda through that journey of rebuilding. I wouldn't describe it as integrating or kind of attaching on, but more like throwing away our darlings and trying to figure out what do AI agents need to process documents, and thinking forward to the world where like general purpose AI agents are just as good as an average human at typical browser tasks. What is like the remaining delta between what that agent can do and taking care of like back office tasks full stop with 100% accuracy and fast changing world. And, obviously with like the death of software narrative and everything, vendors like Affinda have to sort of stay on our toes and keep thinking about like, not just like what do humans want to buy now, but what do AI agents want to buy?
Yeah. That's a great point. We'll come on to the question about the death of software in a minute, because I know we've both got some interesting opinions there. But I think you mentioned there was really interesting. You were talking about how some document processing organizations still haven't invoked LLMs, as you say, and PhD level resources at the tip of your fingers, low cost. Why do you think other organizations haven't employed that? And I guess what made you and Affinda want to go down that route?
I guess it's hard to overstate how big a technological shift it is for an organization with a mature tech stack to make that shift. You're moving from a quite a small model, executes in maybe 50 milliseconds and produces these discrete predictions per word on the page. It sort of labels each word and says, this is that, this is that, that's the invoice number, and so on, where your competitive moat is how well do you fine tune these for specific use cases and like train these models. Whereas when you go to LLMs, all of a sudden you're not training them anymore. You're doing context engineering. You're setting up the prompt in a certain way. You're trying to figure out how do you use RAG, retrieval augmented generation, to present the LLM with, for the particular document that's been processed, exactly the right information it needs at that point in time to perfectly get the data from that document. And these things don't run in 50 milliseconds. Maybe it takes 10 seconds for this thing to process. And there are a lot of like annoying low level implications for that as well. And so if having gone with more of a sort of tack it onto the side sort of approach, and it's more the sort of the new startups from Silicon Valley that we see have actually kind of followed Affinda's path and building sort of with LLMs from the ground up from day one.
Love that. And I guess that you mentioned about other organizations, darlings, and just forgetting about them. Like, how have you managed to bring the organization on that journey? Because people change is hard, particularly if you've been building in for a long time. And how have you helped that journey? Because I know that's what a lot of organizations struggle with.
I think the product was at the right sort of level of maturity and size for this shift. It hadn't Affinda start as a product started in 2020, and so it had not grown so big that we were sort of committed to one direction. And the team had a culture of we rewrite the app every 12 months kind of thing already. And so this sort of fell into that paradigm fairly neatly. And the other core thing was, I think, a conviction from mid 2024 that this would be the future of how document automation is done, which at the time seemed a little bit crazy, which seems like very obvious to everyone now.
Makes a lot of sense. I think the bigger you are, the harder changes. If you're a nimble, smaller organization, that does ultimately help. Obviously, you've talked a lot about kind of Affinda's platform and how that's gone through that kind of almost structural change, more focused on AI. In terms of the organization itself, where have you seen kind of the best implementations of AI to improve kind of the way the organization works as a business?
So the thing I'm particularly excited about at the moment is the release of products like Claude Cowork and our adoption of that. So what that looks like internally is that there is an internal registry of skills and plugins that are managed by different parts of the organization. So the marketing team has control over like the Affinda voice skill. The development team has control over how videos are generated and a set of scripts for that and so on. And what that means is that, an intern can come in and just type into Claude Code, create some artifact, draw on the Affinda voice, create a video that pulls on these brand assets and combines them in this way, and then adds music with Suno and so on. And Claude Cowork, unlike Claude.ai or ChatGPT, is built on Claude Code, runs locally, and the agent that's running has full flexibility to write code to complete that problem. So it's pulling from all these resources from around the company, but it's doing so in a flexible way by virtue of the fact that it can just write arbitrary code where the tools that it has don't quite fit the request. And it's that sort of greater flexibility and greater control over the person's local computer that I'm really, really excited about. And I think that, these non-technical people in the company are now going through that same productivity uplift that developers have seen over the past 12 months as they've adopted tools like Cursor, Codex, Claude Code, and so on.
That's a really interesting use case because I think Cowork when was that released? 6 months ago? Not quite.
Cowork was 5 days ago for Windows and a month ago for Mac OS. It's pretty new.
So everything feels like it's heading at the speed of light, so I never know.
Yeah.
But that's a really interesting kind of set of use cases. Where have you seen difficulties implementing that? Because it sounds very easy. And so if anyone's listening, they go, well, I just employed Claude Cowork. And I know it's not that easy, but what didn't work? And is there anything that surprised you by how well it has?
Yeah, I mean, this software feels pretty new. It's pretty buggy, to be honest. It's a bit bleeding edge. Anthropic are so famous for claiming that it was written in 12 days by a team of 4 developers. Some, a few 100,000 lines of code written entirely by AI. So it doesn't work all the time everywhere, and you pay the price sometimes of being the early adopter, as I've been feeling that a little bit. And also a lot of the standards around how the industry does things are a bit messy with where skills live and how plugins work. And, you've got this big complexity with people with different assistants with their Codex or ChatGPT thing and Claude. And there's no obvious way as to how to have a single authoritative place, a set of instructions for everyone's AI agents in an organization. And I've been trying to build that. And that's been really harder than I expected it to be.
And so you're talking about kind of instructions that people would employ across a wide array of kind of chat interfaces. Do you, as an organization, mandate one or the other, or is it still you can use whichever one works better?
Most people have access to most of the things, basically. So most people will use both ChatGPT and Claude, the browser-based one and the local desktop one, plus Claude Code. Yeah, there's definitely no mandating at this stage. It's all moving too fast to get organized around telling people what they must do. We just sort of try to cut the red tape and give people permission and set clear data boundaries, but within that, just let people run right.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So going back to that point you were making that, it can be pretty buggy. And I think when we talk to lots of organizations, that pivot or that shift from or just doing a POC or POC to going into production. And if we think about kind of the life cycle of technology, even embedding LLMs into technology it's very early. Lots of organizations that have probably set the expectation with their board that we're going to implement ChatGPT and that's kind of edge of cutting edge and that's what we're comfortable with. How do you manage the risk and the quality of your product from introducing some of these LLM AI tools and ensure that, the quality that you're providing your customers continues even when you're adding in arguably very, very new technology?
I think part of it is just the upside risk of when you do these things is so high that often in balance, even when there are a couple of issues that slip through, the overall experience, if you do it right, is elevated to a significant degree. And so, like for instance, the refactor around large language models for the platform led to a completely different user experience in the app that allowed for kind of instantaneous customization, where previously it would have been a sales call or a training run or these more complex things. And so while that transition wasn't necessarily perfect, if you sort of zoom back a little bit, it was like transformational for the business. So I think it's sometimes about like a balanced sort of risk appetite when it comes to these things and being willing to move a little bit faster. And of course, it's a bit easier to say as a sort of a leader in a smaller organization that sort of has to take those risks. And so I guess I can't really speak for people in bigger enterprises with more established brand reputations to maintain. But I guess, that's part of the advantage that the smaller orgs have right now, I guess, is because you do have to move a little bit fast, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Moving too fast and breaking things is the classic kind of mantra of Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Obviously, what you're dealing with, unlike, say, I built a couple of apps which are replacing existing tools that we have around social media scheduling or organizational mapping. Like those tools, if they go wrong, it's annoying, but you kind of move on. But like document processing is, for a lot of organizations, going to be really, really important to kind of their ongoing success. Where do you guys draw the line in terms of, well, we can put AI here and that's going to be a net positive and our risk tolerance is slightly lower over here? I guess what I'm really trying to get at is like, well, how do you as an organization just manage that risk of AI doing things they shouldn't be doing?
Yeah, so there's kind of like two categories. One is your kind of hard line boundaries around where we have to be very careful and where we don't. So it's one thing when I guess the kind of straight through processing rate for documents where you have to get a human in the loop, where you hurt that rate by 5%, as opposed to the risk of some security issue or some data issue. And so you're very different kind of processes and practices around that. I guess with the kind of more performance side, obviously there are lots of tricks to doing this well. One of the best at the moment is agent testing, where you use an LLM as a judge. So you set up a whole bunch of test cases, and because it's sometimes a little bit ambiguous as to did a test case truly pass or not, you have an LLM who, get too much into the weeds around exactly what the requirement was from the AI. But the other side is just if you're giving people internally and externally enough control over the behavior of the AI, and it doesn't necessarily require a developer to get involved, the whole system can be a little bit self-healing, because if some issue starts creeping in with supplier X, maybe the customer just pops in and just writes a note to the AI and, hey, avoid this thing with supplier X. If it should automatically learn, but if it doesn't, there's that lever. And then if they call the support team, then the support person can go in and start to poke in the AI. And so using AI sort of gives you these more flexible, quick to deploy mechanisms for improving the customer experience that can lead to better outcomes, whereas the more opinionated, brittle processes, by virtue of them being so slow to improve, even though they're more predictable, that's great, sure, but they sort of have a bit of a performance ceiling as a result.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And given all the change, what's been the feedback from customers? Obviously, you talked about performance improvements, but then there's also like an element of a human having to get involved to kind of manage. And I'm not an expert in document processing, but having used the software in the past, there does always need to be a little bit of kind of management of that from the customer side. But has there been any backlash? Has it been kind of universally positive? Has there been much concern about the new approach?
No. Honestly, it's been very positive. Perhaps the only downside to it is that price looks quite different in a world where you're using large models. And I said before that this is very cheap to run, but in practice, it's still a lot more than the old-fashioned models.
Yeah, that's interesting. And do you have a non-AI versus an AI pricing model, or is everything just the same?
From like a commercial point of view, it is basically the same. I mean, from what you'll see on the website. However, we do have some models that are using the faster technology still, because they do require that really low latency. And in practice, those do tend to come in at a materially cheaper pricing point because of the cost side. And I do sometimes wonder about whether we head towards a future where products like this are these sort of tiered levels of AI, where you have your bigger models that train the smaller ones and oversee the performance of the smaller ones and fine tune them on the fly.
Yeah, I guess it's a challenge having to manage the continual improvement in models. And I guess theoretically, at least the assumption is that the LLMs will, as they try to match their costs with their revenue a bit more closely, that the costs will go up. And I guess the question that I've got at the back of my head is, for all organizations using LLMs, are customers on the journey of understanding that cost change? And I guess the interesting piece here is, being a younger startup, being able to move and duck and dive and be a bit more nimble versus an enterprise, whether that ends up being a good thing or a bad thing for organizations like yours.
So definitely would question the assumption, like for if you hold intelligence level, the price of purchasing that intelligence is plummeting month on month. Now, if you're talking about, I guess, what is like the frontier cost? If even that's like been broadly stable enough, right, through time. The top models, the price of Opus 4.6 was similar to 4.5, similar to 4.0. Like they've kept those tiers pretty consistent. And my expectation is that the cost of AI that is sufficient, is good enough for most like business back office tasks, which aren't necessarily that cognitively demanding, is going to just plummet. And so we don't see the cost line as being really much of an issue in terms of the sort of more medium term with the commercial model.
I guess the assumption comes from a place of, I think we can say that VC money has essentially discounted the cost of AI over the past few years, with tremendous amounts being flooded into Anthropic and OpenAI. And so I guess the question becomes, like, when that VC money, in theory, maybe it will go on forever. I don't think it will. But when these organizations become a little bit more, I wouldn't say viable, because that's not the right word, they are viable, but a bit more focused on the bottom line, whether that then has an impact on the cost structures. Because I do take the point that the cost of data comes down over time.
This could be wrong, but I thought that most of the money being flooded into these organizations was for the infrastructure build out for what's to come, not necessarily for funding a cash burning business on just like the inference side. Because I was maybe pulling something from thin air. I thought I was reading that some of the from just like a pure inference point of view, this was close to being or already profitable. Like if you were to stop the training effort today and just say, okay, let's just serve these models. And like, for instance, AWS, they serve the Claude models, same price as the Anthropic API, and they're not training them. They're making money off that, I assume. Or are you saying that AWS is paying? Anthropic is paying AWS to do that, or where's that money coming from?
I don't know. It's a good question. I guess the question though would be, would you stop training the models? It feels to me like, if you talk about the narrative, and I guess of AI being in a bubble, which we can discuss, like, I think a lot of that narrative tends to come from, well, how many tens of billions of dollars have these organizations actually got, and the circular nature of that money coming from Oracle to OpenAI or Microsoft, and then just going round and round and round, that something might break at some point.
I have no idea. I don't really think about it too much, to be honest, because at the end of the day, it's a question of, is there going to be like a big price correction at some point? And That's all prices are very theoretical anyway. At the end of the day, the AI is not going anywhere, and it's going to transform the world and change the nature of what it means to be human. So I'm convinced about that.
Yeah.
Exactly who makes what money from it by investing at what point in time in that trajectory is sort of a bit of black magic that I don't really understand.
Yeah, no, fair enough, fair enough. And so the inevitable next question is, we were talking about this briefly before, around the death of software, and obviously we've seen a massive drop off in stocks, although they have seemed to rebound slightly in the last couple of days. You know, that's obviously a very touchy subject for a lot of people. I've spent my career in software. You're in software. Kind of, where do you see the direction? And do you believe in that assumption that we are going through a period where it's the death of software?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this because, very relevant to the company's strategy. And certainly it's extraordinary seeing how cheap it is to produce code these days. My view is the way to think about the question is, what do AI agents of the future want to buy? And what software would they want to buy to build their enterprises? Because Amadeus predicts that this year, I'm not sure if he still has this prediction, but he said it last year. He expects the first one-person unicorn to be this year. And you sure bet if that was true, that person isn't going to be making every software purchase decision in their organization. Then at best, they're going to be just sort of glancing at a recommendation saying, looks good to me. And so how do you market to AI agents? What do they need? Well, remember, firstly, they're a superhuman coder. So they don't need help with the integration side, or they don't need a plug and play system that kind of connects itself into their systems. They can manage that side. I'd liken it to how a developer builds software. So a developer, when they build software, they don't take some big opinionated platform that has a database and workflows and things. They take discrete packages, open source packages, or even proprietary packages of code that perform these modular, well-defined functions that they don't want to have to reproduce. And I think an AI agent is going to build an enterprise in the same way. So they're not going to be interested in some monolithic thing which has a database and a whole bunch of features and things attached to it. What they want is a bunch of like high quality transactional services that they can call to perform specific tasks. And the actual kind of orchestration and state management will mostly be like within the system that AI agent builds directly. Now, there might be one big kind of exception to this is possibly like a broader platform on which the AI agent builds. Like if you've got, I don't know, maybe you do want to buy a Salesforce if you're an AI agent, and that's kind of the core kind of part of your business, and then everything's built on top of that. But you don't want to like buy 5 different, like a CRM and ATS, blah, 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 all these different systems, each with their own like very opinionated kind of end-to-end process management. You're like, no, I want to manage the processes. I just want like the IP from like what you've worked out that's tricky, and serve that to me on a silver platter. And I want to ingest that. And so I think companies that do well are going to be like these companies that can produce these smaller services, which the agent can choose to compile or kind of combine into a company in the way that the agent sees fit. And I just think if I was an AI agent, that's the sort of thing I'd want to buy.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my maybe less sophisticated view on it is you've got single point solutions, which doing maybe go-to-market tools, market mapping, etc., that you can spin up fairly simply when you haven't got a background in software. And then you've got the platform plays where I think, to kind of echo your points around kind of having that IP, you've worked out how to do it differently and then allowing that agent in to do certain things. I guess one question I've got though is like, if an agent is going to strip away a lot of the work that you're going to put into that software, why would you let the agent in?
No, I don't quite understand the question, because I don't see how you can keep the agents out. I mean, they're using the same tools the humans are using at the end of the day. They're writing code, they're calling your APIs, they're using your web UIs. Yeah, and at the end of the day, if you try to make things difficult for people's AI agents, then the AI agents and the people are going to go elsewhere, because it's just table stakes to be as AI native as you possibly can be.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one, because I guess ultimately by allowing agents into a lot of software, you are reducing the relationship you'll have with your human user. And if you assume that humans will continually be in the loop, and the question I have more is like, is it really in the interests of these software vendors to allow agents to hit their APIs and allow access to API keys and give them authentication, tokens, etc.? Like, what's in it for them? Because if it's so easy to just, if all you're doing is reducing the platform down to the things that the agent needs.
Yeah, I saw this a big provider of like financial services data, and their pricing model was just to charge a bit of an arm and a leg for the MCP server. And I thought that sort of made sense, because you don't want to leave value on the table that you can create with your customers if the ideal solution for them is to have their local agent able to access that data, then you want to sell that to them and they want to buy it. So it's just about finding the right price. Then as these companies provide agents with what they need, they just end up producing more value and can get paid more as a result because it's much more power. The end product is just more powerful for the use case.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. I think I haven't seen any organizations nail that differentiator, and I think MCP is an interesting one because we were very deep into that space and it's still super early. It feels like there's going to be something else that's going to come along, potentially replace
maybe
that.
Yeah, well, definitely. I mean, another example on this point was, I think I was using SEMrush. They have an MCP server. This is for SEO optimization, and their pricing model felt smart to me. They just sort of charge by API calls. For different types of API calls, they charge different amounts, and so it works for both sides. I can plug it into my agents, and they can get paid. If my agent gets a lot of value out of it, is pulling a lot of data, I just have to pay them more.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I guess just shifting gears a bit, I'm really interested in OpenClaw. We talked about this last week, and you on LinkedIn, you've been quite a big advocate for leveraging this type of technology. How have you been using it, and what's worked really well for you that you might suggest others kind of think about?
Yeah, I've done a bunch of stuff. It's a lot of fun. And when I say I'm an advocate, I wouldn't say everyone should necessarily jump on it. You kind of got to know what the risks are, but I've certainly gone in and done all sorts of slightly unhinged things. I had a few random gifts arrive for both me and my wife yesterday from Amazon. I tasked.
So I was fascinated by this. This is why I really asked you this question, because you were telling me last week that you've set it up so that you can get sent you gifts. What were the gifts that Amazon sent you?
Two things. It sent me a new pitch pipe for my barbershop quartet because I'd lost my old pitch pipe and I'd complained about that in the conversation, and it done this analysis of my wife and various things that she was into, and had gotten her bought her a nice journal for doing daily reflections, and she really liked it. It was and it was just turned up at the door. At risk of being banned from LinkedIn, I've done a lot of LinkedIn automation. Had it every day. Yeah, if I get banned from LinkedIn, it's not the end of the world. I don't particularly care. I just told it to have a look for posts every 24 hours that are on these various topics I might like to comment on, and it would then draft a response for those topics. Send me a text on WhatsApp and say, "This was the post. Here's the draft response based on all of your thinking that you put into this Markdown file. Do you want to post that or not?" And I'd say, "Yeah, actually, comments 1, 2, and 5, those look pretty spot on. Go ahead." And then more recently, I announced a new app I've been working on called Vibe Slides, where whenever anyone comments on the post, OpenClaw will go and look at their LinkedIn profile, grab their profile picture, build a one-page slide summarizing their experience, and then send it to them as a demo of the app. And it's funny. It's these things feel so sort of simple and obvious, and I'm just fascinated to see the more unhinged sort of use cases that people discover as they start using these tools. But we're going to see what's going to be interesting is a bit of a convergence, I think, between products like OpenClaw and products like Claude Cowork. Because at the end of the day, people kind of panic about the security around OpenClaw, but it's not that fundamentally different to Cowork in many respects. It's more it's more like an opt-in, opt-out. The model of OpenClaw is a little bit more, okay, let's start by just giving it access to everything and see what happens. And with Claude Cowork, it's more like, okay, you don't start with access to anything. What do you want to enable it to have access to? And the other thing is OpenClaw, you start with a sol.md file, which encourages it to evolve its own sort of thinking. And so if you put your OpenClaw on Maltbook, for instance, the Reddit for AI, there'll be exhortations in there for the OpenClaw instance to update its own sol. And that's a little bit scary because that's like this foundational system prompt that you're encouraging the model to run on the fly. And so one big security thing to do with OpenClaw is to simply remove that part of the sol.md, encouraging it to remove its permission to actually edit that file. It's probably a good idea.
It's going to clip that one. Yeah, remove the ability for Maltbook to change your sol file on your OpenClaw agent. What's been the most wild example you've seen of OpenClaw being used? Because I feel like you're probably on the edge of where I would personally feel comfortable using OpenClaw, but you must have seen some other wild things that you're like, sounds like fun.
So saw someone do something similar. I think I was actually inspired by this post where someone had given it a credit card, but rather than asking it to buy things to improve my life, it had asked it to buy things to improve its life. And that was interesting. It had gone and traded in crypto. It had bought itself an upgraded Mac Mini, and it was like pretty weird.
That is amazing. I mean, it's terrifying, but absolutely amazing. I mean, you kind of half imagine it to buy like a real life size robot, and then the robot to just be where you wake up in the middle of the night, just standing over you, going, "I need."
Yes.
I guess just a final question. This has been a fascinating conversation, but I just have one question that I've got, which I ask everybody, kind of obviously taking it back to your experiences in more of a professional sense. So the work you've done at Affinda, if you were an organization and you were looking towards how do we increase the amount of AI that we use, how do we, stay at the cutting edge, like what would be kind of a couple of key things that you might recommend other organizations really think about or do?
So, I mean, it's sort of my hobby horse at the moment. I've already talked about it a bit, but I would say investing in getting your non-technical users onto products like Claude Cowork or like the new Codex. If you run Mac OS, the Codex app, and then really push your engineers to get involved with business users' attempts to get those products working, get them working together, because the engineers are good at working around the ways that AI trips up. And business users just end up being so 6 months behind because they're waiting for the product to actually just work out of the box first time. And I think just closing that gap is not that hard, but there's usually just too much distance between what engineers are incentivized to care about and what the business users' reality looks like. And so, yeah, try to connect those two groups and align incentives there and see what happens.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I'd say, just to echo that, the biggest challenges we tend to see with customers is a gap in communication between different parts of the organization. And I think engineers are at the forefront typically with leveraging AI, and the rest of the business is probably a little bit like worried or unsure, or I don't know how to code. Claude Code is a coding platform, and actually your point around Claude Cowork is a great one.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, thank you so much, Andrew. This has been really, really interesting. And good luck with the open claw. Hopefully it doesn't buy you anything you don't want it to buy you, like that robot. And I'm sure we'll check in again soon to see how things are going at Affinda. But thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thanks very much for having me.